This is exactly what I've been waiting for. This is exactly, I don't mean to sound like Cat Williams, but this is exactly what I've been.
A bona fide travesty. Yo, what's good, everybody? If you've been living under a rock for the past month, you missed the most unhinged sports meltdown of 2025. Stephen A. Smith, the king of hot takes, the sultan of screaming, the emperor of ESPN chaos, completely lost his absolute mind over a college quarterback. We're talking about Shedeur Sanders, son of NFL legend Deion Primetime Sanders. And when I tell you the internet broke, I mean it literally crashed Twitter for like 20 minutes because everyone had something to say. But here's the thing that's got me shook.
This is bad. This is very.
This isn't just your typical sports beef. This turned into a full-blown generational war. Gen Z versus millennials, old school versus new school, and honestly, the drama was absolutely unmatched. By the end of this video, you'll understand why millions of people picked sides in what started as sports commentary, but became the most toxic debate of the year. Because Stephen A. didn't just criticize a player, he accidentally exposed something way deeper about privilege, accountability, and why the internet can't handle uncomfortable truths. And trust me, the plot twists in this story, they hit different. Let's set the scene. POV, your dad is literally one of the greatest athletes of all time, a Hall of Famer who played 2 professional sports, and now he's your college football coach. Sounds like a dream, right? Wrong, because the internet said, we're about to make this your entire personality. Shedeur Sanders didn't ask to be born into football royalty, but honey, the internet was not letting him forget it. Every single game, every single throw, every single Instagram post got dissected with the energy of forensic scientists looking for evidence that he's just riding daddy's coattails. When Deion Sanders took over as Colorado's head coach and brought Shedeur with him, it wasn't just a transfer, it was a whole production. Netflix documentaries, primetime interviews, social media takeovers. The University of Colorado went from who to having more followers than most NFL teams. But here's where it gets spicy. The internet loves to hate on famous kids trying to make their own way. We've seen it with LeBron James, we've seen it with other athlete offspring, but Shedeur, he was different because he was actually good. Like really good, and that made people even more pressed. The numbers don't lie. Over 8,000 passing yards, 70+ touchdowns, leading Colorado to their best season in years. But every time he made a great play, the comments were flooded with daddy's connections and must be nice to have primetime as your coach. The memes were ruthless. When your dad writes the playbook but you still can't read, became a whole trend. TikTokers were making videos pretending to be Shedeur, asking daddy for help with homework. It was giving main character energy, but not in a good way. But Stephen A. Smith was watching all this unfold, and he saw something that made him absolutely lose it. Because while everyone was making jokes, there was a much deeper conversation happening about privilege, nepotism, and whether talent actually matters when you have connections. And when Stephen A. finally opened his mouth about it, the internet was not ready for that energy. Stephen A. Smith woke up one day and chose pure violence.
Was baths and the beyond does not eradicate the stain, the stench that hovers over me every time my name is associated with this damn franchise.
We're talking about a man who has spent decades perfecting the art of the hot take, but when he started talking about Shedeur Sanders, he unleashed something the internet had never seen before. This young man has been handed everything on a silver platter. Everything. And now you want me to sit here and pretend like he's earned his stripes? I will not do it. I will not. The clip went viral in minutes. We're talking 50 million views across all platforms, thousands of reaction videos, and comment sections that looked like actual war zones. But here's the thing, Stephen A. wasn't just ranting into the void. He was addressing something that had the whole sports world divided. Draft experts couldn't agree on Shedeur's NFL potential. Some had him as a first-round pick. Others said he'd struggle to make a roster. The kid was simultaneously overrated and underrated, depending on who you asked. Mel Kiper Jr. called him a legitimate NFL prospect with excellent fundamentals. Meanwhile, other scouts whispered about his lack of adversity and questioned whether he could handle pressure without daddy's protection, the internet immediately picked sides. Team Stephen A was mostly older millennials and Gen X folks saying, finally, someone said what we were all thinking. They were tweeting fire emojis, and Stephen A is speaking facts with the passion of people who had been holding this opinion for months, but Gen Z, they were not having it. The TikTok kids came for Stephen A's entire existence. This man really woke up and chose to hate on a 22-year-old, became a whole viral sound. They were calling him chronically online, giving bitter energy, and my personal favorite, Stephen A is the sports equivalent of that relative who ruins Thanksgiving dinner. The generational divide was real. Older viewers were sharing the clips with captions like, "This is what accountability looks like." Younger viewers were making Stephen A into a meme villain, complete with dramatic music and villain origin story TikToks. But then Stephen A doubled down, and I mean doubled down. He went on First Take the next day and said something that changed the entire conversation, something that made everyone realize this beef was about way more than football. The audacity was absolutely unmatched because Stephen A was about to say the quiet part out loud and the internet was about to have a full-scale meltdown. Stephen A. Smith looked directly into that camera and said something that made the entire sports world uncomfortable. And I mean the kind of uncomfortable where you're watching through your fingers because you know someone just crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. Let me tell you something about privilege in sports. When you have a Hall of Fame father who opens every door, coaches your team, controls your narrative, and shields you from criticism, that's not inspiration, that's privilege. And we need to stop pretending it's the same as earning your way. The internet went nuclear. We're talking about trending topics, think pieces, and the most divided comment sections I've ever seen. Because Stephen A didn't just criticize Shedeur, he called out the entire system that allows connected kids to have advantages that others don't. Gen Z was not having it. The TikTok response was swift and brutal. Stephen A really said having a supportive father is a bad thing, with crying, laughing emojis became a viral trend. They were making videos about how success shaming was toxic and that Shedeur couldn't help who his father was. But the older crowd, they were eating it up. Facebook comment sections were flooded with Stephen A is speaking the truth these kids don't want to hear. LinkedIn posts about meritocracy and earning your way were getting thousands of shares, and then Stephen A went there, like really went there. He started comparing Shedeur to other NFL prospects who didn't have famous fathers, who came from nothing, who had to prove themselves at small schools with no media attention. While Shedeur Sanders is getting Netflix documentaries and prime time coverage, there's some kid at a Division II school throwing for 4,000 yards with zero recognition. That's who deserves our attention. The uncomfortable truth hit different because it was actually kind of factual. There are incredibly talented players at smaller schools who get zero attention while Colorado games become national events because of the Sanders name. The internet was torn. Twitter polls asking, is Stephen A right about privilege in sports? Were split almost exactly down the middle. The replies were even more chaotic. Half the people saying finally someone said it, and half saying this is just hating on a successful family. But then something happened that nobody expected. Stephen A made one more comment that completely flipped the script and revealed what this beef was really about, because it turns out this was never actually about Shedeur Sanders at all. The plot twist was about to make everyone realize they'd been arguing about the wrong thing this entire time. Hold up, because I'm about to blow your mind with what was actually happening behind all this drama. Stephen A. Smith's meltdown about Shedeur Sanders, it wasn't really about Shedeur at all. Here's the tea that nobody was talking about. Stephen A. was actually having an existential crisis about the entire sports media industry. While he was going off about privilege and accountability, what he was really upset about was how the game had completely changed. Think about it. Stephen A. Smith built his career in an era where sports journalists were the gatekeepers. If you wanted attention as an athlete, you had to go through ESPN. You had to respect the traditional media machine. But the Sanders family, they said, nah, we're good, and built their own media empire. Deion Sanders doesn't need Stephen A. Smith or ESPN to control his narrative. He's got millions of followers, his own content deals, and direct access to fans. His son gets more engagement on Instagram than most ESPN segments get on TV. Stephen A. was watching a 22-year-old college quarterback have more cultural influence than veteran sports journalists, and it was making him big M.A.D. This wasn't about football talent or nepotism. This was about power and who gets to control the conversation. The numbers are wild. Shedeur's game highlights get more views on TikTok than Stephen A.'s most viral rants. Colorado football content outperforms most ESPN programming. The Sanders family literally doesn't need traditional sports media to be successful. Then Stephen A. said something that gave away the real game. These athletes think they can bypass the system that made sports great. They think they can just create their own rules and ignore the people who built this industry. There it is. The real issue wasn't Shedeur's talent or his father's influence. It was that the Sanders family represented everything that traditional sports media was afraid of. Athletes who didn't need their approval or validation. And Shedeur wasn't alone. LeBron James has Spring Hill Company. Tom Brady has his own content empire. Athletes everywhere were realizing they could cut out the middleman and speak directly to fans. The internet finally started to understand what was really happening. The memes shifted from Stephen A. versus Shedeur to old media versus new media Gen Z, started making TikToks about how traditional sports journalism was becoming irrelevant. The roasts were absolutely brutal. Stephen A. really said, "How dare you be successful without asking my permission?" became a viral trend. POV, "You're mad because athletes don't need you anymore," was hitting different. But here's the craziest part. Both sides were kind of right. Stephen A. had valid points about accountability and earning your way, but he was also clearly threatened by a changing industry that was leaving him behind. The beef that broke the internet wasn't really about sports at all. It was about power, control, and what happens when the next generation decides they don't want to play by the old rules. And honestly, that made the whole thing even more fascinating. Just when you thought this internet beef couldn't get any more unhinged, someone decided to leak private messages. And I'm not talking about regular drama. I'm talking about the kind of tea that made everyone realize this had gone from sports commentary to personal warfare. Anonymous accounts started dropping screenshots of what they claimed were DMs between sports media personalities talking about the Sanders family. The messages were brutal. "We need to make an example of this kid. Deion's getting too comfortable. Time to humble them." The internet turned into CSI Sports Media Edition. People were analyzing fonts, timestamps, and profile pictures, trying to verify if the messages were real. Digital forensics experts were getting tagged in Twitter threads. When reporters reached out to ESPN personalities mentioned in the leaks, suddenly everyone was unavailable for comment. The silence was deafening, and it made the leaks seem even more credible. That's when Deion Sanders decided he'd had enough. He posted an Instagram video that immediately went viral. "Y'all want to come for my son, come for me. But understand, I've been dealing with haters since before some of y'all were born." The video got 50 million views in 18 hours. Deion wasn't just defending his son, he was calling out the entire system. Stephen A. and all these media personalities built careers off our backs, and now they mad because we don't need them anymore? Stephen A. went live on ESPN within hours, and he was heated. Deion Sanders wants to make this personal. Let's talk about personal. Let's talk about using your son as a prop for your own ego. What happened next was the most explosive live TV moment of 2025. Stephen A. started listing every time he thought Deion had put his son in difficult positions for media attention. The producers were probably having heart attacks. Twitter was moving so fast that hashtags were trending and dying within minutes. Stephen A. went too far. Deion told the truth. ESPN. Shook. The entire platform was chaos. You could see other ESPN hosts trying to sprint away from the controversy. Skip Bayless posted, "I was not involved in any private conversations about the Sanders family." The damage control was obvious and pathetic. That's when everyone realized this wasn't sports beef anymore. This was a full-scale war between old and new power structures in athletics. The leaked messages weren't just gossip, they were evidence of something systematic. When CNN, the New York Times, and the Washington Post start covering your sports beef, you know it's transcended athletics. This wasn't just entertainment anymore, it had become a legitimate news story about media, power, and generational change. Harvard Business School did a case study on the controversy titled "Disruption corruption in sports media, the Sanders effect. Northwestern's journalism school assigned it as required reading. This beef was being studied in classrooms. Within weeks, 3 separate production companies announced documentaries about the controversy. Netflix, HBO, and Amazon were all bidding for exclusive access to the Sanders family. The beef had become intellectual property. Lawyers got involved when the leaked messages suggested potential coordinated efforts to damage Shedeur's draft prospects. The NFL Players Association started asking questions about whether prospects were being unfairly targeted. The FCC actually opened an investigation into whether ESPN's coverage constituted fair journalism or entertainment with an agenda. Government regulators were looking at sports takes. The absurdity was peak internet culture. BBC Sport did a segment called The American Sports Media Meltdown. International outlets were covering this like it was a cultural phenomenon, which honestly, it was. Industry insiders started whispering about a settlement between ESPN and the Sanders family, but neither side would confirm. The speculation alone generated millions more views and clicks. Major sports networks started implementing new guidelines for how personalities could discuss young athletes. The controversy literally changed industry standards because the backlash was so severe. Within months, 5 more athlete families announced their own media ventures. The Sanders controversy had shown that traditional sports media could be challenged, and everyone wanted their piece of independence. So here we are, months later, and this absolutely chaotic internet war has officially become the most influential sports media controversy of the decade, and honestly, nobody saw it coming. The generational divide is still there. New polls show that 73% of Gen Z sided with Shedeur, while 68% of baby boomers sided with Stephen A. The middle ground basically doesn't exist. You're either team old school or team new school. Stephen A never really backed down, but his approach became more careful. His ratings stayed high, but the controversy taught him that going after young athletes' families was dangerous territory. He learned that the internet has limits, even for hot take kings. Shedeur, he's thriving. His draft stock actually improved after the controversy because the attention forced people to actually watch his tape instead of just reading hot takes. Sometimes the best revenge is just being undeniably good at what you do. But the real legacy, this beef accidentally exposed how sports media actually works behind the scenes. It showed fans that narratives are often manufactured, that personal grudges influence coverage, and that athletes don't have to accept unfair treatment. We're seeing a whole new generation of sports media that's more transparent, more diverse, and less gatekeepery. Young journalists learned from this controversy that fans want authenticity, not just manufactured drama. The memes are still coming. Stephen A energy became a way to describe when someone gets irrationally mad about something. Sanders' confidence became a positive term for being unapologetically successful with family support. Most importantly, college athletes everywhere learned that they don't have to accept criticism quietly. They saw what happened when someone fought back against unfair narratives, and it empowered a whole generation. The financial impact is wild. Colorado football merchandise sales are still 400% above pre-Sanders levels. Stephen A's book deal was reportedly worth $15 million more because of the controversy. Everyone made money off this chaos. But here's what's got me most excited. This is just the beginning. Shedeur is entering the NFL, Stephen A is still making hot takes, and the internet is hungry for round 2. The sequel could be even more unhinged than the original. This controversy taught us that sports media is really just another form of entertainment, that generational differences run deeper than we thought, and that the internet's attention span might be short, but its memory is forever. So drop your ultimate take in the comments. Has this controversy changed how you view sports media? Are you team Stephen A, team Shedeur, or team everyone involved is messy? And don't give me boring takes. I want the spicy opinions that are going to start fights in the replies. Smash that subscribe button, because if you enjoyed this deep dive into internet chaos, we've got more coming. Hit the notification bell, because when the next chapter of this saga drops, and it will drop, you're gonna want front row seats to the madness. Stephen A. Smith thought he was just doing his job when he criticized a college quarterback. Instead, he accidentally started a cultural revolution that's still changing how we talk about sports, success, and family support in athletics. The internet chose violence, Stephen A. delivered chaos, Shedeur clapped back with success, and we all learned something about power, privilege, and what happens when unstoppable drama meets immovable internet culture. This wasn't just sports beef, it was a masterclass in how one hot take can spiral into a multi-billion view cultural phenomenon that changes an entire industry. The audacity was unmatched, the drama was unprecedented, and honestly, we're all better for having witnessed the most legendary sports media meltdown in internet history. Thanks for going on this absolutely unhinged journey with me. Peace out, and remember, the internet never forgets, but it also never stops being absolutely, completely, utterly chaotic, and that's exactly why we love it.